Welcome back. So before we move on and talk about joints, I want to just point out a little bit the importance that stress has. And we tend to think that stress is a bad thing, but actually the problem comes when we overstress ourselves and our bodies, because the body actually needs stress to stay healthy. So when yoga teachers, for example, say things like listen to your body, rest when you're tired, and so on, they're not really serving you. So we're not really serving our students when we say those things. We might make them feel good about themselves because life out there is already so competitive that it's so nice to just not have to be competitive on the yoga mat. But actually your body needs to be taken beyond its daily threshold to stay healthy. So this is the breaking news. So telling our students when it's too much, go into child's pose, it's actually detrimental to their own health. So I'm going to explain this in a scientific way. So bones will grow thicker and stronger if they're subject to compressive stress. So this is called the Wolff's Law, and it basically says that when we increase stress on a bone, its structure becomes stronger and thicker. Now, there has been studies carried on space astronauts who experience no stress in their bones because, in space there is no gravity. And these studies have shown that they lose a significant amount of calcium and that their bones can atrophy to a point that they cannot walk after coming back to Earth. Yeah, so this is called the disused osteoporosis, and it's actually a thing. So likewise, when we don't use our muscles, they atrophy. And it's not completely clear whether muscle growth is the result of mechanical or metabolic overload, but what is known is that the mechanism for muscle growth are best achieved when an exercise is performed to the point of momentary muscle fatigue. So if you're starting to feel fatigue on the yoga mat, you should not go into child's pose. You should actually stay there and you'll become stronger. So if we refrain from stressing our tissues, we will create fragility in our bodies. So while on the one hand, too little stress creates atrophy, on the other hand, too much stress can lead to degeneration. And this is what we see in the first image on this graph. Yeah, too little atrophy, too much degeneration. So the optimal position really is in the middle. Now, when we practice yoga, we need to be very clear about our intentions. Are we striving for optimal health, or are we working towards some performance and, we are more interested into the fancy poses and all that? Because, athletes, dancers, and gymnasts, they're all trying to maximize their range of motion and, what they do. But this does not mean that they're getting healthier. In fact, it's quite the opposite. Many athletes and dancers and gymnasts have significant joint issues in later life because they dangerously stress their bodies to obtain the best performance. Yeah. So the optimal position for health is what it's called the Goldilocks position. So not too much and not too little stress. So if you look at this graph, you'll see a classic N-shaped curve that illustrates the danger of being outside the optimal bounds. So when you remember the story of Goldilocks, so she finds the mama's bed too soft, the papa's bed too hard, and the baby's bed is just right. So to obtain maximum health, we need to find that right place where the tension in our poses is just right, not too deep, which creates degeneration, and not too little, which creates atrophy. In the second graph, in the slide, you can appreciate that the amount of stress that our tissues can tolerate decreases with increased stress and increased time. So if you continue to stress the tissues to a point where the two curves cross, then damage occurs. However, notice the third graph. Here we see how important rest is, the rest period. Yeah, so you should stress your tissues, but then give your tissues time to rest to increase their tolerance. So taking days off is absolutely necessary. So we understand that Chronic stress creates fragility. Acute stress followed by rest creates anti-fragility. And this is the main difference between the human organism and any machine out there. Machines like computers and cars are fragile. They wear out over time and as they accumulate stress. Instead, living organisms get stronger with sustained stress over time. So you can understand that modern living with sedentarism and comfort at all costs is actually a problem, and it's actually made us more fragile. Even when you are injured, there are studies nowadays that suggest that resting in bed is not ideal at all to recover from an injury. Just to give you another example, the comfort of eating 3 meals per day is also not good for our bodies, because later, well, you probably have noticed this, nutritionists are starting to catch up with this new trend, which is the trend of fasting. And right now, everybody's talking about how important intermittent fasting is. When we occasionally starve ourselves, the body starts to basically cannibalize its own tissues and starts by eating the weakest and most damaged cells. That can be, for example, pre-cancerous cells that can give us troubles later on in life. So this is one of the reasons that intermittent fasting right now is all over the place. But interestingly, when I go to India, in the past, if I've been sick, maybe a little feverish, or I had some, health problem, you know what the first cure they always give you is? It's fasting, always. They always tell you that the first thing you need to do is fasting, because the body takes care of itself when there's no food supply and it doesn't have to be busy digesting your food.